rely on an idea. Think of an idea, couple it with a team, because that's the core, and there is enough opportunity available to make it happen. That's what I had. Over to the next panelist, please.
So Kunal, you may chip in here.
So thanks, Chintan. Again, pleasure to be a part of the panel. Of course, we've got some amazing entrepreneurs sitting here, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from Sanjeev, Kuldeep, and all of you on what you really feel is the way to evangelize entrepreneurship in the country. But with that, I think, unlike a lot of digital innovations that are happening around us, we are in a stage when it comes to broadly renewable energies. All of you being pioneers, you've laid the foundations for the renewable energy revolution in the country. So kudos to you on that. I think the next layer of innovation that we have.
Kunal, I think Kunal, your voice is breaking. Maybe you can just switch off the video. I think there's some bandwidth issue at your end.
Can you guys hear me better now?
Yeah, much better.
Okay. So there's, of course, a lot of opportunities that exist in sectors beyond solar, including areas like biomass, which we are beginning to see some interesting entrepreneurs creating solutions. But I do believe that the real innovation in the sector is going to come from use of what people today call the Internet of Energy, the use of digitization to derive the maximum juice out of an existing panel, being able to operate in a fairly interoperable manner, being able to predict or forecast what the generation would be to the closest in the band as possible, being able to kind of source energy from different sources on a real-time basis as a prosumer. So a lot of those opportunities are going to be areas wherein entrepreneurs ought to be creating newer solutions. I think what is also going to happen is a lot of convergence of different digital tools, whether it is IoT, whether it is artificial intelligence, machine learning, whether it is micro payments, whether it is use of other blockchain and other solutions. I think all of these need to really come together and create the next revolution within the solar space. Of course, there are enough examples from other sectors. We've seen how a Zoom doesn't even own a car and is just a digital solution. Can we create more such platforms which will really be leveraging digital technology and creating asset-light solutions? I think that's what the future is going to look like. But of course, this will get built at the back of what you guys have done. So it can't be done without you. And therefore, the future really lies in co-creating some of these solutions together, wherein maybe large incumbents like you need to partner with early stage entrepreneurs who may be creating digital solutions or physical solutions, you providing them access to market, because very often it can be a real effort for an entrepreneur to break into large enterprises. Can they partner with you, piggyback on some of the relationships that have been built by existing incumbents, whether it's large corporates or entrepreneurs like we've got on the panel? I think those are going to be some of the opportunities going forward. In terms of the government's role, I think the government has a very, very important role to play. Interestingly, the government has been at the forefront of trying to support some of the entrepreneurs, whether it is the Startup India effort, whether it is effort by the Government of India in the past to create solutions, or even a fund that I had created in the past called Infuse. The government has played a role, but as we see now, globally, there is significant interest in the climate change space. A lot of capital which is beginning to be committed by foundations, family offices, large investors. I think the government has to play an active role to channelize some of this capital to India. Unless the government plays that catalytic role, the money will not automatically come in here. Of course, the entrepreneurs would do their best, but we need to create programmatic mechanisms for the money to come in, whether it's creating stuff like a fund of funds in the clean tech or energy context, or creating a large fund, not just infrastructure focused. I mean, of course, we've got infrastructure focused funds already being initiated by the government, but also tech disruption around renewable energy focused funds that need to be created, which would catalyze entrepreneurs who are doing not just fundamental R&D innovation, wherein regular venture capitalist is not going to put in money, but also digital innovations that need to be supported for the sector. And the sector has its own set of challenges, and therefore the sector is, as many of us have seen, not necessarily a sector wherein regular venture capitalists would invest in the Indian context, but by de-risking, the government can actually make sure that more of these entrepreneurs are able to find investors. So those are my 2 cents. Rakesh, back to you.
Great to hear your comments, Kunal. And may I now request Professor Rao to take the mic.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope you are able to hear me. So I am a bit of an odd man here. I come from academia. I also don't work in the renew area directly, but I had an institution where there is so much of activity happening in the renew power space, and we also take pride in the fact that the country's largest renew power company, Renew Power, by Suman Sinha. Suman Sinha is an alumnus of IIT Delhi, and he has also sponsored a center of excellence here, which is looking at the futuristic activities related to renew power. And as I said, there are lots of activities here. In fact, IIT Delhi runs today a 100 kilowatt plant from out of the stubble that is generated in Punjab. There is a 100 kilowatt electric power plant which is operated by IIT Delhi in Punjab right now, coming out of the stubble generated there. And also we have on our campus a 3 megawatt solar capacity. On all our rooftops we have now installed solar. So there is a lot of data that is getting generated. We're also looking at the futuristic aspects of solar. One of the interesting projects is the effect of pollution on the solar power generation. So that's also, there is a lot of modeling work happening. And we don't look at energy, in isolation. Energy and environment are related. So we're also looking at the linkages between energy and environment and what sort of issues that exist and what can be done even in terms of a healthy energy mix. That is a major activity for our policy people. There are research groups in our physics department as well as Center for Energy Sciences who are looking at the fusion and fission technologies as part of that energy mix rather than just focusing on one single solar or the second one the wind. I think we're also looking at some of those futuristic things. There's also a lot of activity on the battery which goes beyond the lithium ion and looking at the newer materials for the lithium ion, and also looking at the recycling of solar panels. I think if we are going to scale up the solar plants, I think at some point 10 years down the line, 5 years down the line, we need to start looking at recycling them. And today, if you need to replace all the coal with solar, you need almost like 7,500 gigawatts of solar. So it's not going to be feasible. So I think we're also looking at the recycling of solar plants where there is a lot of activity happening. I think startups is something where I see a huge focus for an institution like IIT Delhi. There are at least a dozen startups we are connected with in the solar area. I think there is a major role government can play in terms of funding for these deep tech areas. I think faculty-led entrepreneurship, faculty turning into entrepreneurs, that is where I see the future for newer technologies to come in, because all these people working for a decade in these renewable power sources based on variety of ideas, I think we need to convert them into entrepreneurs. We need to convert the PhD students into entrepreneurs, because these are all deep tech areas. I think we cannot survive by just importing some panels and installing them everywhere. We need to develop newer technologies, and I see a huge role for academic institutions in that space. And I think the institutions need to become idea factories when it comes to addressing the future challenges. That is what is currently happening. And I know at least 30 projects which are ongoing at IIT Delhi, which are in various stages of the technology readiness levels. And many of these faculty and PhD students turning into entrepreneurs is where I see the future for the Renew Power from an academic institution point of view.
So very well said, Professor Rao. In fact, in very short span of time, you have raised some extremely extremely vital and critical areas. Areas like there is no one single truth. What would be the optimal generation mix? What is the future of hybridization? Where is our storage at the moment? What could be the game changers, going forward in terms of creating the most optimal generation mix for the energy sector? Then you talked about an extremely relevant subject for the future, which is how do we handle the solar panels once the 25, 30 years are over? What's going to happen to them? So recycling of that. Then extremely important point what you mentioned, that in India, when would we really leverage the power of academia and bring it to the industry and derive the innovation from academia to the industry, so that it is made available for the larger good of the people. So this marriage of academia and the business is very important. And definitely, I think the guys who are taking the challenge of getting into the unknown territory and getting into the startup zone, especially on the innovation side, would need a lot of wisdom from institutes like IITs and IIMs. So with this, let's move on to Vandana. Vandana, who's the Chief Program Officer of National Skill Development Corporation.
Thanks, Rakesh. And I have to say, it's been quite fascinating listening to all these views coming from outside the sector. Like Professor Rao, I'm probably one of the exceptions here in the panel. But just to bring in, the perspective from the manpower and the role that the NSDC can play, or our organization can play in supporting some of the very ambitious expansion plans that are being envisaged for this sector. So basically, the National Skill Development Corporation is a public-private partnership, and over the last 10 years, we've basically worked at bringing a strong connect with the private sector to expand the capacity in the skills ecosystem. So we have now, through an ecosystem of about 650 training providers, capacity of training approximately 5 million people in a year. And that's something which is really aimed at addressing what the market requirements are. And one of them, of course, is going to be some of these emerging sectors like renewable energy. This is something where we have been working now over the last few years through our Sector Skill Council, which was created in 2015. And we have worked towards creating a whole infrastructure, as well as the qualifications and the training solutions that could address the requirements of the businesses that are coming into this space or are planning to expand. And just to draw kind of reference from some of the other sectors where we have provided such support, the recent rollout of the Ayushman Bharat scheme, the Swachh Bharat scheme, and now the Jal Jeevan Mission. Our role has been, of course, to provide a lot of the last mile capacity under some of these programs. But most importantly, the aim is to address the requirements of industry and businesses. And we can and are providing turnkey solutions which are basically addressing the business requirements in an either customized manner or through what we are delivering currently through our various programs already under the government programs, as well as under market-based programs. And many people kind of think that what we do is entirely under the government programs, but actually half of our programming is under market-driven programs. And several of our training providers have connected with big corporates who have manpower requirements and providing very customized solutions to them. So this is something which I think I would like to just articulate as an ingredient that would probably be needed to make the kind of plans which many of the startups, or as Tanya mentioned, maybe not startups, but moving to the next stage of maturity, the businesses, that they would probably need to plan for. And that's the kind of role that the skilling ecosystem aims to play. And Another aspect, I think, which we are now ramping up a lot on is digital skilling. And we have, operationalized a platform called eSkill India, which is providing approximately 800 courses. And what we are seeing is that, the scale up that's possible for skilling is enormously high through this platform or through these digital solutions. And a lot of the time, people do not necessarily need a full, long 300-hour kind of training solution, but it could be an upskilling solution. And given how technologies are changing in the RE sector, there possibly will be requirement for a lot of upskilling that will take place. And we did something like that for the refrigeration AC service technicians with, a short module, a bridge course module for about 25,000 such technicians. So that kind of, upskilling is something which probably will become more and more important as we go forward for emerging sectors. And the other part, which I think will become probably more and more relevant, is the kind of intermediaries that will be needed in the value chain, the business value chain. And there might be entrepreneurial roles that will be needed at the last mile. So the rooftop solar PV entrepreneur is one of the qualifications that we run. It's an 80-hour course. So if there are businesses who are seeking these kind of intermediaries, those kind of onboarding efforts can be scaled up very rapidly, and we've done that for actors like SahiPay as well as Airtel Payments Bank. We're working with both of them to provide these kind of intermediary solutions. And lastly, just want to leave the thought that apart from the skilling efforts, what we have worked on is to create a repository of skilled manpower through kind of a database called ASEEM. That's been very recently rolled out, and it has, as we speak, about 35,000 profiles for the solar PV sector. So I think these are ready interventions that probably the sector could leverage to support their scale up and expansion ambitions. So that's broadly from what the perspective I'd like to share from the skilling ecosystem.
So indeed, a great perspective, Vandana, which you shared with all the participants. I would say that for a business, in simplistic words, we need three things. One is an idea. It should be a great idea. Second is we need to have the capital, money to run that, put that idea in practice. And third is what you talked about. We need to have the right people to make that idea and the money work. And as Tanya mentioned that, for example, if we enhance the energy or efficiency by 1%, the impact is 3% on the capital. That is the return. We have seen that, you mentioned about the efforts being made by your organization on, for example, skilling on digitization. Digitization is playing a humongous role, and what are the key catalysts? How can we enhance our operating efficiencies? Case and example could be a wind farm or a solar farm. On the other side, if we see in the matrix of growth versus the sector, clearly renewable is one of the forerunners. We also now hearing the strategies and decisions. For example, NTPC saying that, well, coal is the past and renewable energy is the future, which is our biggest utility in the country. So renewable sector definitely on the path of growth. And we all, the founders sitting out here, would say one biggest challenge, even beyond the capital, is get the right people to run the idea. So I think you've given a very good message with whatever efforts, your organization, the National Skill Development, is making. How are we connecting that with the industry is very, very important. At times the water is there, but we are not able to see that water, and we are still thirsty. So I think it's an important area to reflect, maybe talk to you more, and find out that are those good resources and the trainers being put to the optimal use by we founders, or it is not optimally utilized. So well, thank you very much, Vandana. We now move on to Unmesh, who is the Chief Operating Officer of iCreate. So Umesh, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Rakesh, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. And it's great to listen to various views of the esteemed panelists. And I would say that this has come at a very appropriate time. I work very closely with startups, and I've been seeing the kind of challenges that they face. And I would say, as Kunal mentioned, as Chintan mentioned, that the reduction in tariff actually is going to open up a lot of opportunities for the startups. Having said that, how and where, right? So definitely for industrialists, for founders like you, when the tariffs are going down, what are the avenues and what are the opportunities that can help you reduce the cost, right? So that's where the can help you do a lot of things, right? So we have, so just to illustrate, we have startups who would do a lot of cost optimization. For example, in a rooftop solar space, there are startups who have given software to sort of do the design optimization to enhance the per unit production, which may result into, let's say, at least 15 to 20% of increase in power. So these kind of opportunities definitely will keep coming up, and the startups will definitely do much better here. Then there are startups in the robotic space, in the solar panel cleaning space. Again, we have seen benefits to the extent of 10 to 15%. Again, in the EV space, for example, right? Today we have seen startups who are providing battery swapping facility, the EV infra creating facility, energy storage facilities. And then there are startups in the space of biofuel, waste to energy space, right? Again, in the space of regenerative braking. So these are areas where startups contribute not only in terms of cost optimization, but also in increasing the efficiencies and increasing the overall sort of operational efficiency. Further, these are areas which will also help you to take renewables to the rural areas. So this is huge opportunity. I would say that for startups there are definitely a lot of opportunities that the industry will definitely provide. Now, what are the challenges, right? The challenges definitely are funding. Funding today is available to the larger players. Even the RBI has increase the per ticket size for the priority sector lending for renewables. However, what's happening is that the seed stage funding is where there is a gap. And if we see, there is actually a reduction in the startup funding and at the seed level stage. So that's one area that I think the industry and the government can sort of help. Industry can also help co-create. There are opportunities where they can help work with startups in terms of co-creation, also in terms of providing POC support. Yeah. So from what we know, working with startups, these are some of the areas where I think there can be some opportunities, and there can be some help which can come, and startup definitely will sort of it'll go a long way in helping the startups. Yeah, that's all from my side. Over to you, Rakesh. Hello.
Yeah, I think he's got some technical problem. I think Kuldeep, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chintan.
Yeah.
To answer a question very directly, I think you asked at the very outset, what's the implication of 2 rupee tariff to startups in the RE space, right? And I think the implication is that that startups in power generation are dead, right? Or rather, opportunity for startups in power generation in 2020 is no more a play, right? I think the 2 rupee tariff is a wonderful milestone for the renewable and energy transition journey for this country, and we represent, 1/7 of humanity. So it's a great implication for the journey of the world. But in power generation now, I think any startup founding today is unlikely to make money, and that's natural. It happens. I remember, Sanjeev and I probably started out around the same time in 2010 and 2011, so a decade ago, and Tanya as well. And green energy generation then seemed like an area you could make money, but I would not recommend that to any entrepreneur today, right? So I think that's one clear implication. In fact, in general, I do think that as a startup, the opportunity for value creation is really in ideas which are digital and scalable, right? I think it's quite instructive that we have many multimillionaires or even billionaires in the Indian space in the digital world, but I don't think there are many entrepreneurs who made even $100 million for themselves in the renewable energy world. So at one level, Radha kaise na jale, right? From a comparison perspective, Radha kaise na jale. So and you've got to follow the money, right? So that's an important aspect. But yes, there will be opportunities around the usage of the renewable energy, around the behind the meter solutions, some other stuff, but not as much as is available in other spaces. Now, the one other question that was asked at the very beginning was, what can the government do? What can the PMO do? Or what can the government do? I don't think it's so much about the startups, but I think from a energy transition perspective, right? And from a, if you take the lens of creative destruction, you have to allow the old to fail for the new to succeed. It is not enough to be able to auction and buy solar or wind or other power at very reasonable rates. You also have to allow the older polluting coal-based assets to get shuttered. And therein, I find in our country, even where state power generating company assets are dispatching electricity at, say, 6 rupees, they are on, right? So at least as a nation, we have to make some hard decisions, not just the pleasurable headline grabbing decisions like we're buying solar at 2 rupees, but also the hard decisions like the very bottom 10% of plants, which were the most polluting, oldest, were shut down, and there are certain economic and other consequences of that, but we have to do that to allow this energy transition to happen faster, and those kind of things require GOI intervention. So these are the two points I would make. Thank you.
Very, very well said, Kuldeep. I think points are bang on. While digital is digital, but what I get the essence from your talk is that there has to be a combo. The brick and mortar on a good technology platform can have a great leveraging capacity, and I think in the startup world would be great for people to look at that. The second one, what you're saying, it is not, the truth doesn't lie in one number. It's not a singularity, but there are dualities and trialities and quadruality, wherein while 2 is good, but what's happening with the bottom 10% plants? So we got to look at the big, hairy, audacious animal, with an overarching view, and see what is best for the country and the environment. Well, now we have Hemraj out here. Hemraj, who's now in his consulting world. after leading Olympus for over a decade. So, Aim, all yours.
Can you hear me, Rakesh and others?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to say a few things that have actually, with a panel like this, almost everything has been said. And I'm coming in at the end. So I'm going to repeat 2-3 things because I'm not speaking to this panel. I'm speaking to that wider audience where sometimes repeating something might actually not be repetition for them, and it needs to be said so it's very clear to everyone. So don't mind that. I'm going to say a couple of things that Sanjeev and Kuldeep have said before. I think the first thing to do when we look at this subject, which for us is opportunities and challenges, is to be very, very clear about where the sector is in terms of its maturity. The sector has matured. People like me may argue that this maturation, which was brought about by some scale, evolving regulation and bidding, has happened before we reached a certain critical scale, but there is no return on this. So, we have to accept that the sector has matured. What does that mean for an entrepreneur today or someone looking to create a new business? We are seeing today in this sector massive consolidation, flight to scale to players with lower cost of capital. We're also seeing very few, if any, MSME investments. Most of the bids are from largely players with a lot of capital, and almost in the last, let's say, 2 years, very few new IPP platforms. Whatever is created, again, is by the big boys who have low cost of capital. So, this is something that we have to recognize for the fresh new entrepreneur coming in. Where does he or she play a role? And of course, all this is happening in the context of Uday not having lived up to its potential. The issues with the grid, where there was an issue with the PPA with AP, and how that's been resolved is not, it's incomplete. And so where you look at the grid power generation sector, in my view, at least I can say that the risks and rewards are not balanced as I'd like them to be for a mature sector. Because when you see a mature sector, when you have low returns, then you should have lower risks. And I would not be able to say that that is the case. So where does a new, fresh investor get in where they can get more balanced risks and returns? And I think this is where the opportunity is. The opportunity is to go into places where, for example, you can balance and match renewable energy with electric vehicles, create decentralized non-grid power solutions, getting into renewable energy forecasting. There's still a market for that. O&M services, we still don't see big enough players on scale doing that, third-party players for wind or for solar. Trading of regulatory products, the carbon finance markets in the world and Europe are going to be coming back. Energy efficiency applications where people are focusing, let's say, on solar agricultural pump sets, solar cold storages, lighting and metering as standalone platforms and businesses focusing on those products, not teeny steps where they've, for various reasons, not scaled up by other parties who have other core businesses. Basically, the idea is now that we can celebrate 2 rupee power, or 2 rupee 30 power, or 2 rupee 50 power, which is what Tanya says. If we can celebrate low-cost power, which kills the market for grid guys, for new guys getting into the grid, then how can we match this very, very low-cost power with higher value applications, which is not just power generation, to really solarize or bring renewables to vast amounts of India, where we know that the carbon production of India from power generation is, I don't know the number, but let's say 30%. I mean, there's a balanced 70% where renewables can also play a role. And so we know also now that with modules going to be produced in India, with batteries going to be produced in India under the PLI program, at least there won't be risks in accessing these products. So to that extent, there won't be contractual, strategic risks. Now, so to me, that is the opportunity where people try and match up low-cost renewables with higher value applications. And I'll say this like, it's almost like a stock record. I've been saying this for the last 10 years because I've been less excited personally by grid generation because of that risk-reward mismatch. But in this space, in my limited view, we haven't yet had the kind of flood and opening of entrepreneurship that we need to have so that other aspects of Indian economic and industrial and manufacturing life and agricultural life can benefit from this low cost of renewable. That's an opportunity. On the financing side, I must tell you that, as I said, even in my experience, the investor community is very excited about this other area, which has its own issues, and we all recognize those. But this is where I think a fresh entrepreneur should be spending their time, unless they come with very deep pockets and low cost of capital. Unfortunately, the India, and again, it's a repetition to people on this panel, but not the group of listeners, there is, in my limited view, very limited VC money for someone to try out a new idea. The founder, the promoter team, the promoter group should make one prototype work. Capital will be available, capital is available, capital is very excited on taking that first McDonald's franchise and funding it to 100. But to make the first one work and to show earnings from it and not a hockey stick, that's really been very, very hard for people. A lot of people have had a lot of difficulty on it. And I can tell you the investor community, given the infrastructure execution challenges in India, has not, given the kind of support to that, the way they would give to an idea in the IT services business, for example, where people get excited and are ready to lose their capital because they know that there is there is eventually a light at the end of the tunnel. So please, whenever people look to create businesses, for what it's worth, from me, and I'm trying to be objective. This is not some form of bitterness. Please go and create your first success on your own, and borrow if you have to, and beg if you have to. And that's why I'm saying go to businesses which are less capital intensive, because then you can go ahead and do that. And then, the sky is the limit, and, investors will be coming and lining up out. They say build a better mousetrap and the world will be the path to your door. And that's what the investor community will do. The other question which we were asked to address in this panel is that what does the government need to do? I mean, the government is focused on trying to improve the ease of business, enforcement of contracts, the tax and regulatory system. Obviously, the government should continue to do that. I think what is needed here for the eventual success of any business, any segment, needs and it's worth saying this, it needs the utilities to work. APDRP, our APDRP, Uday, now new Uday, we need to make this work better. You cannot run a country or a modern economy or $1 trillion economy with broken utilities. And so we need the utilities to work. And you know why? For even the segments, the more attractive segments that I'm talking about, you need to have sustainable tariffs. What's the tariff I'm going to meet? If I'm going to be Sanjeev or Kuldeep and I want to make a sale, and again I got to do charity, that's not going to work, right? The tariff sends a very powerful signal which they have to compete with. So, and that tariffs means that the utilities have been restructured and they're working. That's something that needs to happen. And the other last thing is, because there's a whole new world of opportunity to be built around matching renewables with electric vehicles, which is not even meaningfully happened in California and other places. There's a whole new universe of businesses to be created there. So we need the EV business to work. The EV business is working. You got 500,000 buses, running on EV in China. So it's working in many parts of the world, and at good scale. We need to accelerate the development of EVs, because we know, I don't think there's anyone saying that, diesel is the way to go for the next 20 years. We know the world is going to go to EV. So how can we progress the regulatory framework and the government get the initial asset build out done, which will then help renewables, and it'll help all these application businesses that I'm talking about. Please note, no one talked about, at least I'm not talking about subsidies and handouts. Get Uday functioning, get the EV business going. That's my message to government if I had one. That's it from my side. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Hemraj. You made some very insightful comments, raised some questions, and also gave some very interesting ideas. In fact, the debate between the big boys versus the people who don't have such heavy money bank with them, how do they position themselves? And then the question comes to the big boys: what is the risk and reward equation? And with the tariffs, which are path breaking and very attractive, like what happened, that also is impactful on the risk-reward equation. And then, when you come to the new opportunities which are in front of our eyes, whether it is the renewable energy and the electric vehicles. So in coming years, the whole load curve is in for a change. What kind of opportunity is going to arise? And in that area, a lot of innovation possibilities exist. And people not having access to large money banks can play a very active role into that, because they'll be at the bottom of the pyramid to start, and can, with innovation, can reach the top. Carbon financing is heating up. Energy efficiency applications, when we are talking of interplay of various kind of generations, is going to be very, very significant. And not to forget, where our 70-80% people exist, that is our rural sector, and where the economy is going strong, is also a very interesting area to work on. But towards at this point, you might have seen that I was facing some technical challenges on this digital platform what we're having. And the technical challenge is very simple, that we do not have 24/7 reliability. So in our condo, where I live in Gurgaon, when the power goes off, our genset starts. We have put some excellent systems, it takes 15 seconds, for power to come back. Then I put some UPS also, so that, my system doesn't trip. But as I understand, the LVRT doesn't work. So my Wi-Fi conks off, and then I conk off. Then again, when the power comes back, the same cycle repeats. So my question out here, since you all are veterans in the power sector, before I get onto the question which I see in front of me from one of the participants, is what is your view on India getting into 24/7 power reliability? If I may ask some of the panelists, who feel that they have a good grip on that, this question is open to you guys. Whoso want to take the mic, and let two people answer this question.
I can start if that helps. So, actually, that's a great question, and I think that's where the industry is moving to. One of the questions and concerns was that solar and renewable, a lot chunk is intermittent power, like solar is daytime power, wind is only when wind shines. But now you have reached this era where you can combine these, which is where the government is looking at multiple solutions like hybrid providing. You're even coupling solar with coal. There are incentives that the government are doing, which are called RTC tenders, where you're coupling different forms of energy. And in addition, you can couple solar with small hydro. You can couple wind with small hydro. As we move forward, there is battery storage that is going to come in. 10 years ago, we were talking of solar at 17 rupees. Today, we are at 2.5. Similarly, storage today is at an expensive price. But 4 years from now, we'd be looking at 24-hour renewable power coupled with storage at sub-grid coal prices today, almost at 3.5-4 rupees, 24-hour power, inflation adjusted and flat. So there is a lot of work being pushed by the government to exactly look at this, that not just look at interim daytime power or wind divide power, but 24-hour power coupled with hybrid solutions, round-the-clock solutions, and storage.
I think I would also like to mention in this connection, at IIT Delhi, we have a major activity, major project right now. IIT Delhi peak electricity demand can go up to about 9 megawatts kind of a thing. And we have three sources of power. We have solar, almost like 3 megawatts. We have diesel generators for emergency power supply. And we have the standard grid power. But in every lab today in our campuses, there is a small UPS system, because there are expensive pieces of equipment inside, and they cannot afford these 10-second, 20-second kind of power cuts. So now at the campus level, we are now developing a solution. This has been a project that is going on for almost like a year now. Now our people have also been developing these solutions, and I think we are trying to make IIT Delhi campus high quality power. Even the fluctuations are not acceptable anymore, and also uninterrupted power, using these three sources of energy by mixing them. So because the question I asked them also, there are AI technologies, ML technologies. Before the power goes, there must be some signature you must be able to read that the power is going to go, and then you can trigger something during that time to maintain the power quality. And apparently it's possible. And at IIT Delhi, we will soon have a solution. And when I told this to my collaborator, University of Queensland, with whom we have a joint PhD program, he said even in Australia we need that. So I think it's not that it's only an Indian problem. I think it's these solutions are getting developed now, and it's a very important question.
Okay, let me put a question from Abhijit Shukla. And what Abhijit is asking is, does government have something for asset management startups? What strategy and approach panelists will suggest for startups, and how the rates should be decided for solar asset management? 2020, solar asset management.
Well, I can take the question. Actually, one of the core things that we have to realize is that in solar, almost 98% of the cost is capex, what you put in, and only 2% is opex. But the impact of the O&M is the units that you generate each year, and thus your return, revenue, electricity, and everything. So while people may undermine the importance of asset management, that is the core which defines whether you make or break your asset and how much money you will generate. Okay, the question was, I think, does the government have any schemes? So I would put it around the other way. I would say the owner, because the person who owns the asset has the maximum incentive to have an asset manager. And I would say the best way to look at it is that a typical, just an O&M of the plant, which is, cleaning, ensuring shrubs are cut, regular maintenance, typically the on the ground O&M is typically around 2 to 3 lakhs a megawatt that you pay today. If you couple something where you can do more predictive maintenance, or you can couple it with data analytics, you can actually say, okay, this panel behind me, I know by looking at my thing is not working. Please send an engineer, look at this. You can generate X amount of more output. And that translates into revenue. And nobody will mind paying you 10% of that additional revenue generated. So, the pricing of how much you can generate is dependent on what you deliver in terms of asset management. But having said that, the thumb rule can be anywhere close to what you pay to an O&M party, and 5 to 10% of any extra generation that you will do, any owner will be very happy to pay.
So, Kuldeep, with your experience, would you like to further comment on this?
So I think, I broadly second what Tanya is saying, that, as part of Startup India, one area where even Honorable PM Modi ji would like to see more is sweating our assets better, and that is only feasible through asset management. So we just need to do a lot more, and I think there is a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs in that space. The government has very little to do really there.
Great, thanks Kuldeep and Tanya. We have another question, which is how this is asked by, I don't see the name, but the question is how we as a biotech startup can get our pilots funded for agriculture waste.
Is by Vanita Prasad.
Okay, by Sangeeta Prasad.
Vanita Prasad.
Great.
Rakesh ji, I'm happy to answer this question.
Sure.
Of course, the government of India has created something called the BIRAC, which actually does a lot of work with biotech startups, and they've been really actively supporting startups across the space. I mean, especially companies that are using biotech as an underlying technology to create newer solutions. And I think what was just described is pretty much up the alley for a startup like yourselves. And as Kuldeep had said, "Ada kaise na jale," I mean, you have to bite the bullet here. You have to really go in deep, leverage all the opportunities that exist out there. There are, I mean, while it may not sit within the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, you have to go to the other departments. And India, I think, has a fantastic biotech support ecosystem, and a lot of incubators exist that are willing to support that. So I think that would be a good place to go to.
Okay, that's great. And as we don't have any other question from the participants, may I say that this has been a great panel. Thank you all very much for very insightful comments and insights what you gave. Let me also thank Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, IREDA, and especially Mr. Chintan Shah, CII, where Ranjit has put all the hard work to put this platform together. I would say thank you all for the third Global Reinvest Forum on startups. Great comments, and I truly hope that the participants have been able to get what they were looking for, and at least coming out from here with at least one or two interesting ideas. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, leave now. Bye. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody.